would melt away." "That's a compliment to my solidity. I melt very often," said Felix, "but there is always something left of me." "I came and waited for you by the door, because the others did," Gertrude went on. "But if you had never appeared I should not have been surprised." "I hope," declared Felix, looking at her, "that you would have been disappointed." She looked at him a little and shook her head. "No, no." "Ah, par exemple!" cried the young man. "You deserve that I should never leave you." Going into the parlor they found Mr. Wentworth performing introductions. A young man was standing before the Baroness, blushing a good deal, laughing a little, and shifting his weight from one foot to the other, a slim, mild-faced young man with neatly arranged features like those of Mr. Wentworth. Two other gentlemen behind him had risen from their seats, and a little apart, near one of the windows, stood a remarkably pretty young girl. The young girl was knitting a stocking, but while her fingers quickly moved she looked with wide, brilliant eyes at the Baroness. "And what is your son's name?" said Eugenia, smiling at the young man. "My name is Clifford Wentworth, ma'am," he said in a tremulous voice. "Why didn't you come out to meet me, Mr. Clifford Wentworth?" the Baroness demanded with her beautiful smile. "I didn't think you would want me," said the young man, slowly sidling about. "One always wants a beau cousin, if one has one. But if you are very nice to me in future I won't remember it against you." And Madame Münster transferred her smile to the other persons present. It rested first upon the candid countenance and long-skirted figure of Mr. Brand, whose eyes were intently fixed upon Mr. Wentworth, as if to beg him not to prolong an anomalous situation. Mr. Wentworth pronounced his name. Eugenia gave him a very charming glance, and then looked at the other gentleman. This latter personage was a man of rather less than the usual stature and the usual weight, with a quick, observant, agreeable dark eye, a small quantity of thin dark hair, and a small moustache. He had been standing with his hands in his pockets, and when Eugenia looked at him he took them out. But he did not, like Mr. Brand, look evasively and urgently at their host. He met Eugenia's eyes; he appeared to appreciate the privilege of meeting them. Madame Münster instantly felt that he was, intrinsically, the most important person present. She was not unconscious that this impression was in some degree manifested in the little sympathetic nod with which she acknowledged Mr. Wentworth's announcement. "My cousin, Mr. Acton." "Your cousin, not mine," said the Baroness. "It only depends upon you," Mr. Acton declared, laughing. The Baroness looked at him a moment, and noticed that he had very white teeth. "Let it depend upon your behavior," she said. "I think I had better wait. I have cousins enough. Unless I can claim relationship," she added, "with that charming young lady." And she pointed to the young girl at the window. "That's my sister," said Mr. Acton. And Gertrude Wentworth put her arm round the young girl and led her forward. It was not, apparently, that she needed much leading. She came toward the Baroness with a light, quick step, and with perfect self-possession, rolling her stocking round its needles. She had dark blue eyes and dark brown hair. She was wonderfully pretty. Eugenia kissed her, as she had kissed the other young women, and then held her off a little, looking at her. "Now this is quite another type," she said. She pronounced the word in the French manner. "This is a different outline, my uncle, a different character from that of your own daughters. This, Felix," she went on, "is very much more what we have always thought of as the American type." The young girl, during this exposition, was smiling askance at every one in turn, and at Felix out of turn. "I find only one type here," cried Felix, laughing. "The type adorable." This sally was received in perfect silence, but Felix, who learned all things quickly, had already learned that the silences frequently observed among his new acquaintances were not necessarily restrictive or resentful. It was, as one might say, the silence of expectation, of modesty. They were all standing round his sister as if they were expecting her to acquit herself of the exhibition of some peculiar faculty, some brilliant talent. Their attitude seemed to imply that she was a kind of conversational mountebank, attired intellectually in gauze and spangles. This attitude gave a certain ironical force to Madame Münster's next words. "Now this is your circle," she said to her uncle. "This is your salon. These are your regular habitués, eh? I am so glad to see you all together." "Oh," said Mr. Wentworth, "they are always dropping in and out. You must do the same." "Father," interposed Charlotte Wentworth, "they must do something more." And she turned her sweet, serious face, that seemed at once timid and placid, upon their interesting visitor. "What is your name?" she asked. "Eugenia Camilla Dolores," said the Baroness, smiling. "But you needn't say all that." "I will say Eugenia if you will let me. You must come and stay with us." The Baroness laid her hand upon Charlotte's arm very tenderly, but she reserved herself. She was wondering whether it would be possible to stay with these people. "It would be very charming," she said, and her eyes wandered over the company, over the room. She wished to gain time before committing herself. Her glance fell upon young Mr. Brand, who stood there, with his arms folded and his hand on his chin, looking at her. "The gentleman, I suppose, is a sort of ecclesiastic?" she said to Mr. Wentworth, lowering her voice a little. "He is a minister," answered Mr. Wentworth. "A Protestant?" asked Eugenia. "I am a Unitarian, madam," replied Mr. Brand impressively. "Ah, I see," said Eugenia. "Something new." She had never heard of this form of worship. Mr. Acton began to laugh, and Gertrude looked anxiously at Mr. Brand. "You have come very far," said Mr. Wentworth. "Very far, very far," the Baroness replied, with a graceful shake of her head, a shake that might have meant many different things. "That's a reason why you ought to settle down with us," said Mr. Wentworth, with that dryness of utterance which, as Eugenia was too intelligent not to feel, took nothing from the delicacy of his meaning. She looked at him, and for an instant, in his cold, still face, she seemed to see a far-away likeness to the vaguely remembered image of her mother. Eugenia was a woman of sudden emotions, and now, unexpectedly, she felt one rising in her heart. She kept looking round the circle. She knew that there was admiration in all the eyes that were fixed upon her. She smiled at them all. "I came to look, to try, to ask," she said. "It seems to me I have done well. I am very tired. I want to rest." There were tears in her eyes. The luminous interior, the gentle, tranquil people, the simple, serious life—the sense of these things pressed upon her with an overmastering force, and she felt herself yielding to one of the most genuine emotions she had ever known. "I should like to stay here," she said. "Pray take me in." Though she was smiling, there were tears in her voice as well as in her eyes. "My dear niece," said Mr. Wentworth softly. And Charlotte put out her arms and drew the Baroness toward her, while Robert Acton turned away, with his hands stealing into his pockets. Chapter 3